Hello everybody, welcome into the Ultimate Scouting YouTube channel. Thank you guys so much for joining me once again. We are going to be continuing our divisional preview series here. If you didn't watch the last video, we did the AFC South. I encourage you to go ahead and check that out. But we are going to be doing the NFC East now. This is a really interesting division. It's actually quite similar to the AFC South, where there's really two teams that are fighting for playoff spots to win the division, and then there's two teams that I would consider more rebuilding. So there's some interesting parallels there. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive into it. Before we go ahead and get started, I will ask if you like football content. We're going to be trying to put out tons of that this year during the football season. So I encourage you, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe. I would appreciate it so much. It means so much to me. So let's go ahead. We're going to go ahead and dive in. So the first team that we're going to talk about today is the New York Giants. The Giants finished last in the division last year. They went 4-13. It was really a bad season. Joe Judge kind of lost the control of the locker room. They had Mike Glennon playing lots, which was never a good sign. They had a lot of injuries. I just don't think that this team was really ever going to be successful. There was too many factors going against them, and I think the motivation of the team really was just pretty dead by the end of the year. They go ahead, they clean house, they get rid of Dave Gettleman, they get rid of Joe Judge. Thank goodness to both of those. They were an absolute train wreck. They bring in Joe Shane, who was the assistant GM for the Buffalo Bills, and then he brings along Brian Daboll with him, who was the offensive coordinator. Daboll was kind of credited with fixing Josh Allen, who, notably had a lot of issues coming out of college and now has turned into a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. So that's a big deal to be able to get someone that I think is really one of the more qualified head coaching candidates that we've seen in quite a while. Have someone that will inspire some confidence, because I think the last couple of coaches that they've had since Coughlin, really, it's McAdoo, Pat Shurmur, and Joe Judge. I have not believed in those guys the moment they were hired. All three of them. I really do not like those hirings. Daboll is someone that I do believe in. He's someone that I do think is going to be a really good coach for them. So that's exciting to at least have a direction and I think a vision for what this team is going to look like in the future. Now, unfortunately, the previous regime messed up the salary cap in particular so badly that it's a really dire situation right now. They gave Kenny Golladay $20 million a year. They gave Leonard Williams an insane deal who's still on the books. You've got Blake Martinez got a ridiculous contract. They finally restructured him this offseason, but it was a disaster. Nate Solder, you got off the books. He was a horrible contract. And so Gettleman just destroyed the cap flexibility of this team to the point that they really couldn't go out and sign anyone. Most of the additions on this list are from the draft. The main free agent that they were able to get is Mark Lewinsky, who's a good guard, but they're paying him $6 million a year. It's not like he was some crazy signing. That's the biggest free agent addition that they were able to get because of the cap constraint they were in. As far as the other additions, you of course add Evan Neal and Josh Azudu to the offensive line, John Feliciano in free agency as well. So that kind of completes a really interesting offensive line that I think could be a really good unit. Neal and Thomas are your bookend tackles. You've got high upside players in Azudu and maybe some of the depth pieces beyond that. You got Matt Pert as well. And then John Feliciano, Shane Lemieux, guys like that are hopefully people that can step in and be successful. Glowinski as well. And just add stability to a unit that desperately needed it. That's going to make it a lot easier for Daniel Jones as well. He's never had a good offensive line at all, and much easier for Saquon Barkley, who's another year removed from that ACL injury, and I'm excited to see what he can do. At wide receiver, you've got Kenny Golladay, as I mentioned. He's really expensive, but hopefully he can get back to that Detroit form that he had. Kadarius Toney was a first-round pick. He's kind of been a weird spot this offseason where he's had a really good camp, but there was rumors that they might trade him. Right now he's on the team. Right now he's looking good. As long as he can stay healthy, I do think he's going to have a good year. You've got Sterling Shepard. You've got Darius Slayton still. So an interesting and relatively deep wide receiver room, though I don't know that it has the high-end talent that you're really looking for. But all in all, this is a good enough offense that Daniel Jones should be able to prove his worth. And that's kind of the question here. Is he going to be able to prove that he can be a franchise quarterback for this team? I think The answer is probably no, but I could see a situation where he plays relatively well. They win 6, 7 games, and they decide to bring him back on a Jameis Winston type deal, a 2 year, $30 million deal. And he's able to kind of be that bridge stopgap type of player and someone that they can build around while the rest of the roster kind of gets overhauled. On defense, you kind of build through the trenches, much like the offense. You got Kayvon Thibodeau to pair with Azeez Ojulari, who they had in the second round last year. You've got Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, who are both good players on the interior as well. The back seven is where I'm really concerned. You got Xavier McKinney, Adoree Jackson is a decent player. Beyond that, I don't like the linebackers, and the corner depth is horrible. So there's a lot of issues there. You had to get rid of James Bradbury because of all of this cap mess that Gettleman left. He was a cap casualty, and unfortunately, he goes to your division rival, the Eagles. And, they had to cut him to even sign their draft picks, which is just crazy. As far as the floor and the ceiling of this team, I see it somewhere between 3 and 7 wins. They had a really bad year last year and still were able to squeak out 4 wins. They were really injured. They had bad coaching, bad quarterback play, bad offensive line play. And I think you're going to get better than that. I think Dable elevates this team a little bit, and I don't think that they're going to be the absolute worst in the league because of that. So I think that somewhere between that 3 to 7 range is very fair. All right, moving on, we've got the Washington Commanders next. The Commanders went 7-10 last year. They had Ryan Fitzpatrick kind of as their starting quarterback, and then they moved to Taylor Heineke once he got injured. They now go out and they get Carson Wentz. We talked a little bit about this in the Colts episode. Wentz is one of the most inconsistent players in the NFL, and there's a reason that they moved on from him. He's going to be on his 3rd team in 3 seasons. His highs are just so high, but his lows are just so low that it's really difficult to build around that kind of volatility. With a team that I really don't love their offensive line, it's okay. You lose Brandon Sheriff, of course, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The weapons are decent. Terry McLaurin's great. You add Jahan Dotson. You got Logan Thomas. Some good players here and there, but it's not fantastic. And so I feel like you're kind of relying on Wentz to really push this team up that next tier, and I don't believe in him to do that. He was in a great situation in Indianapolis, a run-heavy scheme. You can use play action, great coaching, and he still wasn't able to find success. When Wentz is good, he's really good. And so that's frustrating because I think this Washington team could potentially knock off some good teams. The defense is on paper really, really good. The defensive line is awesome. You've got Chase Young, you've got Jonathan Allen, you've got De'Aaron Payne, you've got Sweat, you added Fedarian Mathis in the draft. So you've got great depth and great stars all across the defensive line. You've got Jamin Davis, the linebacker from last year. Your secondary is decent. You've got Fuller, William Jackson, Cam Curl. On paper, this defense should be a top 10 unit. Last year, they were not. And so that's kind of a big question is, can they rebound and get back to the form that they should be at based on the talent on this roster? And I know they had some injuries. Chase Young got hurt early on in the year, but they just didn't play up to standard. And for a team that I think is going to be relying on their defense to probably win a lot of games because Wentz in the offense, I just don't have an extreme belief in them. I'm not sure that this defense is going to be able to carry them to the heights that they hope to go here. I think for Ron Rivera, he's in a pretty unfortunate situation. The Commanders' front office is extremely dysfunctional. The ownership at the top is just horrible, but I think Rivera's grown a little bit stale here. I don't know that they're going to be able to really push for a playoff spot, and I would not be remotely surprised to see Rivera fired at the end of the season. Not that I don't think he's a good coach. I do think he is a pretty good coach, but I just think things have kind of grown a little bit stale here in Washington, and they're going to look to make a move if they really don't see immediate success, which with the talent on this roster, I just don't foresee. As far as the 2022 win projection here, I projected somewhere between 5 and 9 wins. I really can't see them dropping below 5 with the talent on this defense. I also really don't see them pushing in an NFC East that I think there's 2 pretty good teams. I don't really see them pushing for the NFC East crown. I think 10 wins is really where you kind of cap that out. If Wentz was only able to win 9 with the Colts last year, I really don't expect him to win more with a worse team in Washington, in my opinion. So I'll be interested to see where they finish up. I think right around 7 and 10, where they were last year, is quite possible here. And I think that they're going to look to make changes if that's the case. Moving on, we've got the Philadelphia Eagles. This is probably the team I am most excited to watch this season. I'm not an Eagles fan, but I will probably be tuning into a lot of their games because I just want to see how this offense looks. Because Nick Sirianni was brought in last year. This is going to be his second year. And for the first half of the season, they were terrible offensively. They couldn't move the ball. They were just, relying on a lot of that Colts passing concepts, a lot of that Frank Reich style offense, and it wasn't working. And so Sirianni made the adjustment. They went to a scheme where they could really use Jalen Hurts' strength, his athleticism, his ability to roll out in the pocket, make throws on the run. Those kinds of things are really where they started to use a lot of their resources. And it helped them so much. They didn't really beat a lot of good teams last year, but they were able to fight back. They made the playoffs. They did get killed by Tampa Bay in the playoffs, but I think that there was so much promise, and they could have said, all right, we're going to build it and just kind of see what happens, slow and methodical. But I really felt like they kind of went all in while also managing the resources really well. They came into this draft with 3 first-round picks. You trade one, and you go and get A.J. Brown, who is a top 10 wide receiver in this league. I think pairing him with Devontae Smith, your first rounder from last year, gives you one of the best 1-2s in the league. Devontae Smith had a really underrated season last year. He was a little bit overshadowed by Jamar Chase and Jalen Waddle and their record-setting rookie seasons, but Smith was really, really good. You add Dallas Goedert, a really good tight end to that mix. Zach Pascal, some really interesting pieces in the depth of that wide receiver room. And it all kind of comes down to Jalen Hurts. Are you going to be able to make the plays? And that's the big question is Hurts going to prove that, he is the guy once and for all? Because if not, the Eagles have 2 first-round picks last year because they traded one of them away. This is going to be really interesting to see if Hurts doesn't prove he's the guy. They might go package those picks and go up and get C.J. Stroud or go get Bryce Young. And so this is Hurts' big chance here. I think that if he proves that he's a great player, they're going to build around him and really push to make this a Super Bowl window with him. But if he falls off a little bit, I think that there's a decent chance that they look to upgrade that position. Additionally, you add Jordan Davis in the first round of the draft. He was a behemoth of a man. He's awesome. You go ahead, you add Nakobe Dean later on in the draft. He fell because of injuries. You had Kazir White as well. You add James Bradbury to Darius Slay in the corner room. This defense is really exciting. There's a lot of nice pieces there. And then this offense is just, I think, has the potential to be really, really fun to watch. And if Sirianni is able to effectively use Jalen Hurts in the best ways to use his athleticism, they're going to be really good. Hurts is a really good player when used correctly. If you're waiting for him to make full field progressions and throw it and rip it into a tight window, I don't think that's his game. But if you move the pocket, have him throw on the run, half field progressions more often than not, or use his athleticism on read options, that can make it a really dangerous offense that I'm really excited to watch. As far as their win projection here, I see them anywhere between 8 to 12 wins, and I certainly think that they're competing for the NFC East title this year. I think I don't expect them to necessarily be a Super Bowl contender with the Rams, the Bucs, the Packers, those kinds of teams, but I certainly expect them to make the playoffs and maybe even make a little bit of noise. Finally, we are going to be looking at the Dallas Cowboys here. The Cowboys are interesting because they went 12-5 last season. They looked really good, and then they kind of had that monumental, stupid moment in the playoff game in the divisional round where Dak slid and they ran out of time, but really went the opposite direction of the Eagles, in my opinion, where they lost a lot of talent this year. They trade Amari Cooper for a 5th-round pick to the Browns. I know that Cooper was expensive at that point, but with the current wide receiver market, it's really not even a bad contract, and you get absolutely nothing for him. You lose La'el Collins in free agency, You cut him. You lose Connor Williams in free agency. Tyron Smith is now injured, which obviously they didn't know going in, but your offensive line is looking really shaky now. I'm concerned. Your wide receiver depth really isn't there. James Washington gets hurt as well, who you brought in. So you're relying on, CeeDee Lamb, who's awesome. Michael Gallup will come back eventually, but he's not healthy yet. So Jalen Tolbert, they just don't have a lot of talent at some key positions. Dalton Schultz is a good player. Zeke and Pollard are both good players. Dak is overhated. He's a good player as well. I don't know that he's an elite quarterback, but I think he's a very good player. He's got a great processor. And so this offense is good enough. They have enough pieces that they're not going to completely tank. And on defense, you've got good players as well. You've got DeMarcus Lawrence. You've got Micah Parsons, of course. You've got Trayvon Diggs, who's a playmaker. He gives up lots of yards. I understand. I think he's both overrated, but he's also overhated because, 11 interceptions is so valuable also. That's 11 more chances that your offense gets to touch the ball. So there's a balance there, but you've got good playmakers on both sides of the ball. I'm confident that this team is not going to completely collapse. You've got two great coordinators as well. I'm actually less convinced about their head coach than I am their coordinators, but Kellen Moore, Dan Quinn are both really good. Mike McCarthy, I just don't really know what he does there necessarily, but you've got a good coaching staff for the most part. You've got a good quarterback. You've got a superstar wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb. Dalton Schultz is a good player. You've got some interesting pieces on the offensive line. You add Tyler Smith in the draft. On the defensive line, I think you've got some interesting pass rushers. Lawrence, Parsons. You added Sam Williams in the draft. I just think that there's some pieces that they have lost that they really haven't gotten replacements for. And so I foresee them finishing somewhere very similarly, 8 to 12 wins like the Eagles. I think they're still going to be competing for the NFC East title. People that are completely just bashing the Cowboys, they're not going to be incompetent this year. But I do expect them to maybe take a little bit of a step back and maybe be more on the same level as the Eagles and some of the just middling teams in the NFC. And that's the biggest question as well is the offense going to be able to be as effective as they have been in the past years, where they've really kind of carried this team without Amari Cooper and without a lot of their stars on the offensive line. You've still got Zach Martin, who's probably the best guard in the NFL right now, but there's a lot of question marks, really, at this point. And those could have answers on the Cowboys roster. I just need to see it before I really think of them as one of the top teams in the NFC. With that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. That is 2 divisions down. I'm so excited for football to really get here. We're getting so close. So we're going to be continuing these division previews over the next couple of days here. So thank you guys so much for watching. Come back next time to see which division is next. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Bye.